Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And just a show of hands, was anyone at my last year's history at Heinen? Okay, cool, awesome. Cool, so you can know my flavor. I like to ask questions. So I'm a recovering history art teacher, not the history part, but art teacher. So when I had my students, I'd like to do little surveys. So just by a show of the hands, who has heard of the Memorial March? Okay, so we got some new people, and so it's really cool. So I have been a Sioux City resident for 3 years. So this will be my 4th fall, and I originally grew up in Denver, in a big city, and then eventually made my way home to the res, and then now I am in a relationship with a Winnebago man, who happens to be Frank LaMere's son. And so Frank LaMere is a advocate. They always call him an advocate, but really he was just like voicing our human rights. So that label of advocate kind of has like a stigma for me, because I didn't like all of a sudden wake up and be like, I'm gonna advocate for this, I'm just talking about our own human rights. So we're gonna go through laws, and I'm gonna be asking you some questions. So right here we have last year's march. So every year we start as a prayer. So it's a prayer walk, but it didn't always happen like that. So this year will be the 22nd year. We had a 20th anniversary, and I thought that would be a really great moment to have a big exhibition here in the museum. And because we've always been on the cover of the Sioux City Journal, and there's all kinds of different artifacts throughout the year. There's the signs and et cetera, et cetera. So the Sioux City, Iowa, the first memorial march to honor lost children was held in October 2003. The march was organized by Native communities in western Iowa to honor 3 children who died in foster care. The march was also a way to demand answers from the Department of Human Services officials in Woodbury County. And I want to start with this quote, because some things I'm gonna say might make you uncomfortable. Why I know that is because it makes me uncomfortable telling you that. So this is a quote from Frank LaMere, and a lot of the times we see it half quoted, but this is the full quote. Nothing changes unless someone's made to feel uncomfortable, and you have to make yourself feel uncomfortable. And that's how we spark change. So I also wanted to welcome you with a trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about some deaths, and then talking about the foster care program and the boarding school program, the errors of that. And so the march initially is to memorialize Native children who've been removed from their homes and placed in foster care. Now, why do we need to memorialize that? Because that seems like an issue on the parents, right? Well, the parents just gotta be better to parents. But now let's step back a few, and we're gonna look at it in an educational stance. So Native American activist and organizer Frank LaMere of the Winnebago tribe, he said in an interview that at the march inception, there was a disproportionately number of Native children in the child welfare system. Often the parental rights of the children's birth parents had been terminated, which is a step towards adoption rather than reunification. Nobody heard our complaints, nobody would hear our concerns. So the Native community decided we would be counted the only way that they could, and that was by their feet. So they took to the streets after the initial ways of operating, going to city council and speaking your 3 minutes, et cetera, after that was not working. So I want to give us a few context and what's really special about this city. And like I said, I'm not from here, so I'm coming in almost like with brand new eyes, seeing it in a way that those of you who have lived here your whole life don't see it. So right away, we are called Sioux City. So I'm a Sioux, welcome to my city. I like to say that a lot of the times. Now, I am a history buff as well. And so I think about War Eagle and Bruyere. So a place for us to thrive and flourish. So when you go to the monument, on all four sides, there's these written words. And so like I'm coming in new, right? So I'm coming in and I start to see what's on these written words. Now it talks about that he's a Santee Sioux and that he was here for peace. And did you know, and I've said this before, War Eagle is not his real name. His real name is Wambli Chikala, and that means little eagle. So the Americans and the government called him War Eagle to spite him, to kind of call him a savage and put him in a light that he's here for war and not peace. But his number one whole mandate was for peace. He was gonna be a chief. He was voted to be a chief of the Santees, and there was gonna be a fight with the other warriors. So instead of like claiming his warrior chief role, he wanted peace. So he stepped away from the Santees and the tribe, and he came here. Now, it's always been anytime rivers meet and come together. So right here we have three rivers that meet, the Big Sioux, the Missouri, and the Little Sioux, right? And so that's always considered a sacred area. And tribes and just humans in general will always come here at those confluences and have trade and have villages. So Sioux City has been here for a long time, as long as these three rivers have been coming together. Now the river channels and flows, so it moves differently. So anyways, so Bruyere was also a French fur trader who lived with the Indians, got an Indian name, who was basically seen as their own. He wasn't really seen as a Frenchman. He was actually given real high honors in the community. And now this name Bruyere is thousands of Indians. So there's descendants from War Eagle and Bruyere who are still around, and they are mostly all native. So they're not really like French, they didn't. Anyways, so what I want to point out here is that on these words here, it says that he is a friend of the white man. And that him and Bruyere wanted to come together here so it'd be a special place throughout the whole America, right? It'd be a special place for Indians and Americans to thrive, okay? And so I'm coming in here with that like historical context. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. The Indian community here needs a lot of, I don't want to say help, but a lot of reciprocity, because at one point, like it says here, but after War Eagle's death, his hospitality and desire for peace eventually paved the way for white settlers to move in and push Native people out. So at some point, there is Sioux City legislation that kicked all the Native people out. And so at some point, I think the city of Sioux City also needs to make a proclamation and welcome Indians back to their hometown. Like for me, I'm very progressive, and I feel that we should have some of the same rights as immigrants have. I know when immigrants come in, they get help and they get places to live. And so that's all I'm asking, is so my people can come back off res and come back and be in the city of Sioux City, and so that there's like an equal population of Indians and Americans at the same time. So if that's not the goal, then maybe we should just like erase all this, right? And erase his history and not call it Sioux City. I don't know. That's like the negative part of it. But this is my dreams and what I see just based off those words that are there. A place for us to flourish. Now, when I look around as an Indigenous woman, I do not see Indians flourishing. Okay, so that's my little nudge to community of Sioux City. Like we got to do better for the Native community. We really do. Because it's called Sioux City, because War Eagle, there's a partnership here. So we have to stand up to that challenge as Sioux City
residents. Okay, that's my rant. So the Siouxland Native community has hosted the march for the past 22 years. And the march honors the children who were moved from their homes and placed in foster care dating back all the way to the 1800s. So is it a new issue? It is, but it has systematic attributes. You know, it's a systematic thing how we got here. And so that's why I want to step away and let's look at a bigger picture. So if the city of Sioux City is supposed to be a place where Americans and natives can flourish, how is that happening? So at the same time, and this is about a decade after War Eagle died, 21 years after War Eagle died, you get the boarding school situation. Now, as a raise of hands, do you know what a boarding school situation is? All right, that's cool. That's half of you. So it's getting really popular. And at War Eagle Park, we hosted some bodies that came back from Carlisle. Now, this is a military institution, this educational institution. It's all about the military. So just very briefly, they first started with warriors. They wanted to take grown men and erase what they already know and fill their cup with Christianity and assimilated American stuff. So they figured that didn't work because you can't fill a cup that's already full. A grown man is already set in his foundations and his spirituality. So let's steal the children. So that was a mandate, and that was Colonel Carlisle Pratt. So he coined the term, and this was the military mandate. It's written all over. Kill the Indian and save the man. So this is 150 years of stolen children that the government has done. So in Canada, they have the same thing, and to me, they're very progressive because they talk about it and bring it up into the spotlight, and now we know about it. So in Canada, there was people who went through the boarding school and remember their friends passing away and being into the cemeteries. And so they wanted their friends to come home and be buried. So they started doing different scientific tests to see where those bodies were. Well, come to find out, they found way more bodies than they were expecting. So what would happen is the government gave the contract to operate the boarding schools to the Catholic Church. So now you insert fathers and nuns who, to me, are like this religious mandate of love, because as I know it, Jesus was about love. But the evidence here suggests very, very otherwise. So I'm going to put this out there to just put that in our mind, that this is a government mandate to steal our children, to break up our families, to break up the household. Okay, so this is a quote from the colonel. Once the Native student graduates their institution, this is what he said. Then the Indian will quickly demonstrate that he can only be truly civilized, and he himself will solve the question of what to do with the Indian. Okay, so to me, that's like, did he just give that power back to us? It kind of feels like it. Like now we have to solve the question of what to do with ourselves. Well, we know that because of climate change. We know that because of the extraction industry, right? And things are just running downhill to the ground fast. So in order for any climate change discussion, there needs to be Indians at the table. So I'm a big advocate for those Indians being at the table. And so I want to mention Deb Holland. Bring it close to here, to a little bit more contemporary times in the past 4 years. So Deb Holland is our Department Interior Secretary. First time a Native person has ever been in charge of the national parks and everything. So the national parks is all Indian land that they are holding in trust for us. So they're holding it in a sacred manner that nobody comes and builds, so that we can go and still practice our ways. Okay, so she has done a national inquiry in the United States of all boarding schools. And they are finding a lot of unmarked graves and some really ugly things. And that's not what this presentation is about. That's a different presentation. That was in Pennsylvania. And so Sioux City is a unique place because when we're coming from the prairies, North Dakota, they all came on a steamboat here to get here. And then from Sioux City, they got on the train and then they went to Pennsylvania. So Sioux City is like kind of like that hub, that corridor, the gateway to the Great Plains. And that's why when those bodies came back here in Sioux City, the Native community, we set up a teepee at War Eagle Park and we hosted those bodies for the night. We had a fire for them all night. 9 bodies came back from the Carlisle Institute. So these are kids that went to school and then passed away. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why they passed away, and they wouldn't send the body home. And the parents would write letters. Please, can I have my kid's body back? And they never were received. You know, I don't know, you got to talk to the Colonel Pratt about that. You know, why weren't our bodies being brought back? And then even some chiefs were asking, can I come get the kid's body? And they were denied their request. So 150 years later, we're finally getting all of our kids' bodies back. And actually today, my companion's not here because there's 71 remains that are given back to the Flandreau tribe. So he's up there and they're having a ceremony as we speak. So, you know, it's not very far. All of this history is real right here, and it does affect us. And that's why the march needed to happen, so that the people running DHS and running the foster care system has that they're aware of it. And, you know, the things with policy and procedure, I really like policy and procedure because I like earning stuff. And you're a human being. And at one time, at some point, you can read that policy and procedure and be like, you know what, let's be better relatives in this situation. And you can go ahead and have your kid's body back, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, okay. I'm going fast. So the Department of Interior, they announced in June 21 that they have a federal Indian boarding school initiative, and it's the first ever comprehensive effort by the federal government to recognize the troubled legacy of past federal Indian boarding school policies and the goal of addressing their intergenerational impact and shedding light on past and present trauma in indigenous communities. So this is a first investigation that she just released, so you can, you know, dive into that later on when you want to look deeper into it. Okay, so next I want to talk about the laws, because it's not just the parents, you know, in this foster care system of removal. You know, so there's this government pre-mandate that says kill the Indian and save the man. That means total assimilation, that nothing about you is Indian, that you're just an assimilated American man. So let's just talk about it. So Citizens Act of 1924, that was when indigenous peoples actually became United States citizens. So before that, we were all our own tribal nation citizens. So I would still be considered a Sichangu or Chetishakoe Lakota woman. And then in 1924, and I say without my consent, they forced us all to be Americans. And what that did was that took away our sovereign rights as our own nation. And the reason why they did that is because 95% of all the Indians at World War I and World War II, they all went to war. My community, the Rosebud Sioux tribe, 100% of the men and some of the women, they say about 35% of the women at that time went to go fight in the war. And so we have the Lakota Code Talkers and the Navajo Code Talkers that won us the war. So in the United States government saying thank you for that, they made us citizens. So it was also known as the Snyder Act, and it granted citizens regardless of tribal affiliation, and then it neutralized all of the tribal members who had not yet become citizens, and it was passed by Congress. And so it did not guarantee natives voting rights. So you're a citizen, but you ain't voting. You are not voting. So it would take decades and decades for all 50 states to grant Native Americans the right to vote. And even today, Native Americans faced inequalities in trying to register to vote or becoming an early voter. So a lot of the times on our tribal IDs, we don't have an expiration date because you never know when someone's gonna pass away. So a lot of our people couldn't vote just because our IDs didn't have expiration dates. And then also a lot of the times our houses aren't by like a corner street, it's a dirt road somewhere. And so because there wasn't an actual street name, for all these years we've been voting through P.O. boxes. We're at P.O. box blah blah blah, but then some states, in order to hinder other people from voting, they changed it so you needed an actual street address. So this is right now, we're still not being able to vote just because of the address thing now, and that just happened within these past 4 years. So then the ICWA law, the Indian Child Welfare Act in 1978, that's not even very far, a long time ago. It's not at all. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to jump to the Indian Freedom of Religion Act in 1978. Because what is America? The right to pray the way you want to. Well, not if you're a native. You can't do that. You got to be assimilated. So the Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978. That means my mom was born in a time where all of her religious rights were illegal. And I am one of the first generations to be a part of actually being able to pray the way we want to. So I'm just putting some things in context here, why we got here to this march. Okay, so then the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. I think this is very important, and I think that a lot of our educational systems don't even care about it. They probably just read it and just took that away so nobody knows and sees about it, because it gives us the right. This act gives Native American tribes more autonomy over programs and services that affect them. Now, where is that, Sioux City Community School? Where is that? Because I don't see it. Okay, I'm just pointing things out there. I'm Frank LaMere Jr. I'm gonna make you feel uncomfortable. Okay, so then another act is the Native American Children's Safety Act, because they were putting children in foster care families without a background check. Okay, so it wasn't until 2016, that's not far away at all, that background checks were used to put people into the foster care families. Okay, so in 2003, the Iowa legislation adopted a law very similar to the ICWA Act, which is codified in chapter blah, 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 Iowa Code, the Iowa Act. It's basically the Indian Child Welfare Act was to keep families together. So even though there may be issues where the DHS, Department of Social Services, has to take the kids out of the family household, well, the Indian Child Welfare Act mandates, it's a law that you have to turn to the tribe. A lot of the times they would take kids from the family and right away put them in foster homes that were non-native. And that's another part, an act of assimilation and the genocide by isolating a person from their family and their culture. And so now we have kids that are in their 20s that are a part of that are from this march. And the families are still here. They march with us every year. So they will give testimony into these stories. So the ICWA law says you cannot take a native child away from their family. You then have to turn to the tribe and say, okay, we have so-and-so, we need foster parents. Is there anybody who will take this child? And so they turn to the grandmas, the aunties, the uncles, our families, and then they can place that child. Of course, with the background checks and all of the mandates, which makes it even harder because in order to adopt a child, you have to own your house. So that just cuts out natives, that cuts me out right away. And so there's different things that are all these red tapes that keep us from actually raising our kids. So they have to take them to the tribe. They have to take them to the family. That's called kinship placement. Now, as a foster care family, when you get kids, you get paid by the government. You get paid by the state to take care of those kids. Now, when you get a native kid, you get paid double, maybe even more than double. But you get paid twice as much to take that native kid. So there's another incentive for non-native families to step up to take these kids. And you know what happens? When a native kid gets placed in a native family, that native family does not get any help from the government. So we're basically foster parents and foster care, and we should be treated the same, but because we're related to that kid, we don't get any help. Okay, so what Iowa did in 2003, because that's when the first march was out there, and it was as a protest. It was to protest taking away our kids and not putting them with native families and enacting in all of the assimilation, et cetera, et cetera. So the state of Iowa turned around and was like, okay, we are going to adopt a law very similar to ICWA into our state. So that's what they did. So basically, the federal law mandates all the states. And so Iowa is supposed to follow that federal law, but they didn't, because things happen. And that's why the Indian community had to get upset and had to be like, well, what's up with this? So the governor at the time put that bill to pass. And it didn't pass 2 years before. And so this was the second time that they put it to pass, and then it did pass. The Indian Child Welfare Act, enacted in 1978, is a response to a crisis affecting American Indian and Alaska Native families and tribes. Studies revealed that large number of Native children were being separated from their parents, extended families, and communities by state child welfare and private adoption agencies. In fact, the research found that 35% of all Native children were being removed. Of these, 85% were placed outside of their families and communities, even when fit and willing relatives were available. The congressional testimony documented the devastating impact this was having upon Native children and families and tribes. The intent of Congress under ICWA was to protect the best interests of Indian children and to promote the stability and security of Indian tribes and families. So they provide effective efforts to the family, identify placement, notifying the tribe, and working actively to involve the children's tribe and parents in the proceedings. And I also want to point out, in my research, I found Heidemann Law over here on 4th Street. They actually do and have won quite a few ICWA cases. And they have a really good information page. And the way they talk about the law is really cool. I really like it. So, any questions? Yeah. Well, yes, because it's a federal law. But Iowa felt the need to adopt it as their state law. So there were so many travesties happening in Iowa that, like, how does that really work out? Because the social workers, somebody was not listening to that federal law. And so Iowa had to make it a state law so that the state workers could listen to that law. So South Dakota, they didn't mandate it into their state law because they follow it as best as they could. I don't know. I can't really tell you completely, but most states, they have not adopted it into their state law. So that tells me that there was something here in Iowa, like something, I don't know. I don't want it to be so much of my opinion, but just showing you the research. And of course, there's Frank LaMere. I love that picture of him because he's kind of smiling. He's like, where's the feds? Okay. So like I said, this is a little triggering. So some foster care data, and it kind of bounces around here and there. So 2003, Iowa population is about almost 3 million people. And out of all that, it's only 0.3% were native. So that means 10,000 natives in 2003 were living here in Sioux City. That's quite a lot. That's the largest population in all of Iowa. So then, and Iowa ranks as number 30 as the most natives living in the state. So also in 2023, that population of natives have jumped. So in 20 years, it's jumped from 0.3% to 0.5%. We're not even a whole 1%. I don't know why everyone's scared of us. Okay. So 2002, Native children were placed in foster care at 7 times the rate of their white counterparts. And that's from the Des Moines Register. So Woodbury County here in Sioux City is home to the largest Indian population in Iowa. Iowa DHS created the Minority Youth and Family Initiative, evaluating current state of Woodbury County. And this is their research. So in 2007, 64% of Iowa's Native children in foster care were from Sioux City. Native Americans made up 0.4% of Iowa's population, but represented 2.1% of the children in foster care. So that means that's a 5-to-1 disparity rate. Also in 2007, according to Iowa DHS, there are 27,751 children of all races and backgrounds living in Woodbury County, and out of those, 975 are American children in the system. Whew. There's a lot there. So also, while Native American children represent 3.51% of the child population in Woodbury County, Native Americans represent 15.6% of children in foster care. 2015, 428,000 Native American children, according to the American Psychological Association, are in foster care throughout the whole United States. In 2022, American Indians made up almost a third of child welfare cases in Woodbury County, despite making up just 3% of the population. The children are left thinking, is it their fault? But it's not, it's the systems. And today, the statistic of today, right now, is they are 4 more times likely to be adopted out than any other races. So there's still a problem. There's still something happening here. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. Can I? I kind of can because, I do a lot of poetry, and there's a word, a sentence in my poem that says, "It's your American duty to erase my people." Because I believe somewhere in there that even though a social worker today is going in and their individual person, and they're like, I'm not racist, I don't have anything against natives, but the system, the American system, is set up that way. And so we kind of just knowingly do it without even knowingly we're doing it. So we got to look at it. We got to look at the wound. We got to look at all aspects of it. We got to talk about that boarding school. We got to talk about kill the Indian, save the man. Because to me, that looks like that's still happening. Prove me wrong. Okay, we're going to move on. So now we're going to talk about the march. Now you know a little bit of history and what's going on out there in the world as a whole and the United States government, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're gonna get right here to Sioux City. So who were the children? We must remember them. So in December 1997, so this was before the march, right? So the march happened in 2003, but this incident happened in 1997. So there's a progression there. Like I said, they had brought that ICWA bill to be state law, and that was denied. And so that was the second time it was brought in 2003. So Hannah Thomas, she died at the hands of her foster parents as a result of shaken baby syndrome. Prior to her death, a Native family fought in court to take Hannah, but was met with obstacles and false accusations. The case was a blatant violation of the Indian Child Welfare Act and moved the Native community to act. And that was a quote by Judy Yellowbank, who are one of the founders who spoke up for the children. So also, Amanda Bearshield Palacios had 4 children who were taken. Her grandma, Carol Bearshield, who is still in the community with us today and has other grandchildren that she has custody of now who are very inactive in the Sioux City community. So she faced the same problem when advocating for her grandchildren. The prevalence of the issue and the tragedy of Thomas's death ignited a meeting among community members. So also we have these other names, Larissa Starr Red Owl and Nathaniel Sanssouci. So I didn't want to get too much into their particular story, but just know the Indian community is enraged. So this picture right here is from our 20th year anniversary, where we stopped and we ended at the convention center, and it was really cool. We gave out shirts. We got some donations that year, and we were able to give out shirts. So everybody's in red here. Also, I wanted to point out that in 1997, as a whole, in the state of Iowa, there were 11 shaken baby deaths. So who spoke up for them? This is a picture of Judy Yellowbank. She has passed away. So she was a strong leader who fought for Native family rights under the ICWA Act on behalf of the Native American community of the surrounding Sioux City area. She helped countless families reunite and help restore their rights, and was a positive role model and a strong advocate of the Sioux City Native American community. In 1998, Judy Yellowbank, with others at the Iowa Department of Human Services, identified the number of Native children and families involved in child welfare and the scope of the disproportionately and strategies to address concerns. Connie Bear King, another elder in the community, and Frank LaMere, with other grandmothers and community members, began Indian child welfare discussions, and as a result, they created the Recovery Our Children, ROC, an advocacy group for Native people, is then formed. So it was their efforts. This group here, the Recovery Our Children, it was their efforts that led to Iowa adopting ICWA into its state code in 2003, and to the creation of a team of Native liaisons known as the Native Unit that has been added to DHS. They formed the Community Initiatives for Native Children and Families, known as SYNC, a monthly collaboration between state agency officials and the indigenous community that continues today. So they still meet every month. And here's a quote from Frank LaMere: "We wish to unify, we wish to heal, and we wish to bring our families back together. And this march is a reaffirmation of that." So SYNC in Sioux City, Iowa, this is Carol Bearshield, the grandma we were just talking about. So in Sioux City, Iowa, the Community Initiative for Native Children and Families came together as a community-based coalition with the mission to ensure that Native service providers and public and private agencies work together to make a difference for Native families. SYNC is active in pursuing compliance with Indian Child Welfare Act. These representatives meet regularly, discussing Native issues and concerns, and work with the Department of Human Services to develop strategies for resolving these problems. The SYNC committee brought together representatives from tribal council leaders, judges, community representatives, a tribal domestic violence representative, the National Indian Child Welfare Association, and Native Service Partners, the Human Rights Commission, Iowa Legislature, Woodbury County Department of Human Services, county administrations. You can see there's a lot of people getting involved. So there is positives. There are a lot of positives, a lot of creating community here in the Siouxland area. So there's Carol Bearshill. A quote from Terry Medina, a Native American advocate who attended the first march, said that this year was intense. Marchers carried placards and chanted in frustration. He said the community felt ignored and disrespected. It took the Native community almost declaring war on DHS and social service workers. They weren't connected to the children back then, he said. So that was a teachable moment for everybody. I love how he says that's a teachable moment. So Frank LaMere also has the Hope Street. That's a plaque dedicated to the Hope Street. And so this is also Judy Yellowbank and one of her sons. And so Judy and Frank have also passed away. So as Sioux City citizens, we must kind of carry on the legacy. And I want to say, as a person who's not from here, who has lived in Denver. My mom was an Indian child welfare advocate her almost like my entire life. So I was always surrounded by ICWA. I was always surrounded by creating community for these foster care children. And what I've noticed is throughout all of the other states and the other nation, nobody else comes together quite like this for a march. So Sioux City is very unique in those aspects that the community has this annual march. The Memorial March to honor lost children has grown from an act of frustration and a show of unity into a spiritual celebration and true remembrance of children and families who have been impacted by the child welfare system. The march is nothing more and nothing less than an acknowledgement of those Native families who have pulled apart and a community that has come together with a resolve to change things. The odyssey of the community collective gathering has served to build bridges, to foster understanding, and to lend to a number of collaborative efforts that have resulted from the willingness of a disenfranchised Native community to be counted with their feet. Their accomplishments are many. Some things have changed, but the Native community and their partners remain vigilant and hopeful that marked improvement will be clearly evident to all. In this regard, a critical analysis detailing successes and failures in our collective efforts must be initiated in a methodical and precise manner where numbers and reports truly mean something. We have Native unit at DHS that our community should not run from, and where workers must truly advocate for families and not the state or the courts. If workers advocate for the states or the courts and not for families, then we have defeated our collective purpose to find ways for families to reunite and be successful. Miracles have happened along the way. Children and parents lost to each other have been found. Decisions have been made to seek out those children lost or taken, and many return to their families, having grown into adults. But most importantly, the people gather to remember, to pray, and to reaffirm that we cannot be quiet until all of our families are protected from a system that has preyed on us under the color of law. The Siouxland Native community has made many uncomfortable along the way, but are unapologetic. The children must know that we have fought for them. It may be their only consolation when they return from a life of isolation, where being told that their people have abandoned them was a daily occurrence. As I have said before, this may be the last march, or they may go on forever. That decision is not in our hands. We will not judge like those in the child welfare system. We are not that enlightened or inclined. We see only the promise of good Native families given the right to parent by the Creator and nobody else. Words from Frank LaMere. Okay, here's a timeline. I know I only have you for a few more. Okay. So we have the timeline. So I put in 1978, the ICWA, it's a 9 there, that's a typo. ICWA ends years of colonial constructs to disembodied families. We got to say it like that because, you know, the way they say things can be sugar-coated and watered down, and you kind of got to read between things. And so in my young 30s era, I'm being more boldly. So that's why I put it that way. It ends years of colonial constructs. But does it? Because we still got to end those. Okay. 1997, that's Hannah, so Native child dies. SYNC established. In 2001, the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association provides resolution in support of SYNC. And so that was kind of like ways to operate, like 101. Okay, and then 2002, the ICWA bill was first brought up at state level and then was denied to move forward. And then in October, this is a newspaper clipping from the Des Moines Herald on that first March. And there's a bunch of protest signs. So if you know now, that's not how it goes. So we don't do protest signs, and we're trying to take our red rage and put it into prayer, but still be counted by our feet. And so the ICWA bill is reintroduced and passes in 2003. SYNC presents at the National ICWA Association's annual conference. And so there's all the states and all the ICWA organizations from all across the state, they're all involved in the National Association. And so being able to be a part of their conference, which I think 20 years later, it'd be great to go and present again on behalf of Sioux City and be like, this is where we're at. This is how we're flourishing together. This is where we came together. Because as a new person who I've only heard about the march, let's say about 3 or 4 years ago, I want to know that. So when I go to the march meetings, I'm asking, okay, what were the list of demands and what other checks do we have to check off the box? And it's not really like that because this community has found a way to come together. Now, other community members might tell you different. But what I see and what the research says is that we are coming together to thrive. We just need a little bit more pushes to be better relatives to each other. So then Native unit, the Sioux City gets 2 employees. So that's the city and the taxpayers actually like putting positions there to, you know, end the years of colonial constructs. And then this training project happened. And then also in 2014, there was a Lexi LaMere Social Justice Scholarship, and that's at Briar Cliff for any natives to go and to be a part of DHS and learn all of that. So in 2016, Judy Yellowbank crosses over. 2019, Frank LaMere crosses over. And in 2020, and this is something new, we have a ceremony that we implemented called the Welcome Home the Lost Birds. Now, this is such a travesty in American culture that we come up with a name for it. We call them our lost birds. So if they were taken away and put in foster care and they grow up, then they have a story. And I'm super native. Like, my name is Sun Rose Ironshell, and I'm just like extra native because that's my resistance to everything. So when I meet another native person, the way they talk, I don't like it. They'll come up to me and they'll say, "Oh, hi, I'm Stacy Smith. You know, I'm Lakota, but I was adopted out, so I don't know anything." And I don't like that because that doesn't mean you're not a part of the tribe. That doesn't mean your bloodline isn't. That doesn't mean you are fully assimilated. So they have a ceremony called Welcoming Back the Lost Birds. So they're coming home, and really all those foster kids need is a hug and saying, hey, welcome back to the tribe. We love you. We miss you. We really appreciate you. Welcome back home. Because then that changes their story, where now they feel they're a part of the people, and then they feel better to learning their culture. And so even in, can you imagine that? Like, America has messed them up so much that even people living today still have this internal mind thing every day as foster kids and people out there in the system. So I have a dad who I adopted myself, who's Pomo, who's lived here, Sioux City, his whole life. And he actually lived next door to Tommy Bolin. So he like plays those records all the time. I know all about that. And so he was adopted out, but he lived his whole life all the way till he's 69. And he finally found out what tribe he was. So he's Pomo from California. So I pull him in and I call him my dad, and I give him all the native experiences. And so there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. And it's like real life. It's not just on paper. It's not just laws. It's real life. And so in 2020, we created the Welcome Home the Lost Birds. So I have my buffalo hide, and I will get on the microphone and I'll talk to all the people there. And I go, okay, is there anybody out there who was adopted out and you don't feel like you're a part of the tribe? I want to welcome you home. So then a lot of young kids will come, and then a lot of like 60-year-olds will come and sit on my hide. And I'm like breaking a barrier there. I'm like smashing that trauma, that historical trauma, because I sit them down. They take off their shoes. I smudge them off with sage. I give them the ceremony foods, which is buffalo meat, the berries, and the corn and water. And I have my eagle fan, and I fan them off, and I ask them where your people are from. Sometimes they say Ponca, sometimes they say Winnebago, Ho-Chunk, Lakota, and all I do is I welcome them back to the tribe. I go, we love you. You're a part of a community. And then I turn around at all the people, and I said, these are all your relatives now. Look at them. They're all your relatives. And now the community, they have a special bond with those lost birds. Now everybody in the community treats them as a lost bird and welcomes them home. So that was really cool. It's been 4 years since we've been doing that. And in 2023, 348 people joined. I guess they said that was one of the largest ones. I was trying to look for, all of that data too. And then 2024, the 22nd year. So also a lot of Siouxland community organizations. There's like so many to put on there. And I liked how a few years ago they had all of their sponsors here. So there's a lot of involvement. And you can be involved too. The city of Sioux City, so in 2016, the city of Sioux City created a proclamation for the march. And Tom Bauska, who leads the Department of Health and Human Services in Western Iowa, said a long history of racial discrimination has pushed Native communities into cycles of poverty that fuel the crisis. As Frank would say, we got to this position with over 400 years of involvement. It's going to take some time for us to resolve all of those issues, he said. It's not just a child welfare issue. Mayor Scott, and different quote, Mayor Scott, Bob Scott, on behalf of the Sioux City Council, proclaimed November 29th, 2019 as Native American Heritage Month, and further proclaimed that November 27th, which is the day of the march, it's always a day before Thanksgiving, as the Memorial March to honor Lost Children Day in Sioux City. And then here's a picture of the proclamation from last year. So ever since 2016, they have a day and they give out that proclamation. So they will be doing that again here pretty soon. So we'll be looking for that and showing up for that. So we are focused on prayer, healing, and wellness, celebrating all the progress made to address the forced separation of Native families that still exists today. And we're trying the best we can to provide not just services to Indian people, but be more proactive. And maybe Sioux City could be a hub for the rest of the state of Iowa, where all the foster parents and all the Indian foster parents, and then all the Indians too, not LaMere. So that's what I think too, about Sioux City. And that's why I wanted to talk about War Eagle and Bruyere. They wanted to create this place as a place for Indians and Americans to thrive. So let's do that. I want to do that. After 21 years, the Native community is at the forefront. A lot of times we are forgotten. No communication, no love, so to speak. But the relatives, Sioux City Community Housing, they've opened the doors. They've come to our seat meetings, and we talk about our Native children and families, Terry Medina said. Siouxland Community Native American Advocate at Siouxland Human Investment Partnerships. We've marched in 30 below weather, snowstorms, rainstorms. We continue on the tradition. It is a tradition to honor our lost Native children and bring awareness to foster care. We wish to unify, we wish to heal, and we wish to bring our families back together, and this is a march to reaffirm that. So these are the current stops. So I only have, this is my second to last one. So current stops, it's a 5-mile walk. And so I would like to start a walking group, and maybe 4 times out of the year, we all do that walk, because I know I get winded when I'm doing that whole walk, because there is a big hill that goes up. So eventually I'd like to start a Sioux City, Lost Birds walk or something like that, which is just us getting together, quarterly or something. So the first stop is up on top at the War Eagle Monument, and that's always a sacred place, because anywhere that's really high, the highest part in the land, will always be the most sacred place to look out. So we start at War Eagle Monument, and everything's a prayer. So it's starting off with a prayer, with a song. Everybody's walking in prayer and quiet. So then we go to the Rosecrans Jackson's Recovery Center. They have a few speakers. And then the Urban Native Center, and then finally to the county courthouse. Now, they used to go inside the county courthouse, but now the judges, they meet us outside. And then we end at the Sioux City Convention Center, and a lot of times we ended here at the Sioux City Public Library. So that was from 2014 to 2019. And previously, the march would start at the Marina Inn in South Sioux and go across the Veterans Memorial Bridge. And in 2003, South Sioux City, Nebraska to Iowa City County Courthouse. So those were some of the previous routes. So join us. We will be walking. We will be walking every year to remember those children. This is one of my artwork, and then this is the Facebook kind of event page. There's not really a flyer out about it, because we believe that everybody should know. You should know, this is important. It's a travesty that you don't know. But then that's just our perspective of how close we are to the issue. And me coming in here, I know a lot of people don't know. And so I'm inviting you, come walk with us. You can also meet us at the convention center too, or meet us at one of the stops. You don't have to necessarily go on the walk. So even if you just met us in the morning to start off the prayer, that would be cool. And then about noon, we have a meal, which is usually like a buffalo stew. So come eat with us. And it's not just a Native thing. I've been going to some foster things. I went to the foster closet, and I invited them, and she straight up told me that, I thought that was a Native thing. We don't go. And it's no, this is a Sioux City thing. We need everybody in Sioux City to understand the systematic stuff that's going on. Because if we don't know about it, if we don't know we're bleeding somewhere, we got to look at the wound. Okay. So join us, and that's my presentation. Any questions, comments?